Morning's come, Lord, my mind is aching.
Welcome back, guys, to another special edition of the Digging Up Bones podcast. This is part of our interview series, and today we're talking to a legend in the country music field. Stan Hitchcock made his first recording in 1961 for Columbia Records, but it wasn't until 1967 when he signed with the then new music label Epic that he started to find success in country music. His biggest hit also came that year with Honey, I'm Home. However, Stan is more than just a man of music. He became a very successful disc jockey on KWO. In later years, he hosted the very popular interview show Heart to Heart, and he helped launch the CMT network. Now, he is the president and chairman of another cable TV channel, Americana TV Network, a TV network that's aimed at those that love country music, folk music, gospel, and bluegrass. Sit back as our very own Brent interviews a legend behind the music of country music, Stan Hitchcock.
All right, here we are with a special edition here of the Digging Up Bones podcast with a great guest, legendary guest, Mr. Stan Hitchcock. You doing all right, Mr. Day, Stan?
Doing fine, Brett. Welcome to our old farmhouse, and we're glad to have you.
I'm glad to be here. It's pretty out here, pretty peaceful for sure.
It's a beautiful day in Sumner County, Tennessee, and sun's shining. Getting warm, it's springtime, and
be a great day to be on the water.
Time to go fishing.
That's right. So I kick this off a little bit, Stan. I'm really excited about this interview, as you may know. But so, Stan, tell us a little bit about when you knew you wanted to come to Nashville and chase country music dream.
You know, it kind of took me by surprise, Brett. Saying I had a country music dream would really be. I guess I would be misspeaking if I characterized it that way.
More of an obsession, I guess.
I'll just tell you, I was raised in the Ozarks Mountains in Missouri, right on the Arkansas border, and raised in a farm, and just like anybody that is a legitimate classic country person needs to be raised in a country like that. I always have said that.
Right.
So when I was 4 years, I was born in Kansas City, but as I was 4 years old, I knew I had to move the folks to the country, man, if I was going to be a country singer. So
right.
anyway, I was raised up around Springfield, Missouri. A little town the closest little town to our farm was Pleasant Hope, Missouri, and that's where I went to school. And when I was 12 years old, I come from a family that loved music. There were no professional musicians in the bunch, but they all loved to sing and play, and we'd get together, and, it'd be a pastime. But everybody in the Ozarks played something.
Played some bluegrass or something like that.
You just did. If you didn't, it was weird. So, by the time I was 12 years old, I finally talked Dad into buying me a guitar. He bought me a guitar on my 12th birthday. And he took me up to Springfield, Missouri, there to Ike Martin's music store. And I'm standing there at the counter looking at all these guitars hanging on the wall. And Ike said, "Well, what do you want, son? What are you interested in?" I said, "Well, I just want to learn to play guitar. I want a guitar." So he reached back and picked up and unhooked a Gretsch Youth model guitar from the wall, and he handed it to me, and it snugged in there just right. It felt so good. And Dad saw that I liked it, and so Dad started making the deal with Mr. Martin to buy it for me. And I never will forget Mr. Martin said, "Son," as he was putting it in the case to hand it to me, said, "Son, you take good care of this guitar now, and it'll always be a good guitar for you." Well, at the end of the trail where I'm way down the trail now, 60 years in country music, and And just looking back, that old guitar, it wasn't so much me taking care of it as the fact that guitar, or a guitar like it, has took care of me all these years. It's give me a tool to make my music, make my living, raise my family, entertain folks, write songs, everything that you do as a country music picker. That's what that guitar did for me.
Right.
So it was a reverse. It wasn't me taking care of the guitar took care of me.
Well, that's an awesome story.
So I all through high school, I'd play my guitar for everything. Every time we'd get together, all the kids get together. Of course, I was the one jerking out the guitar and playing. And I'd go out on when I discovered girls when I was about 15 years old. I kind of suspected them before that, but I really knew that there was something there when I was about 15. I started dating them. And I could tell right off I was going to like girls real good. So I would take him in. I had a 48 Chevy Fleetline, man. I had that thing lowered and had candy apple red, had twin pipes on it, had moon hubcaps. It was sharp. I'd take them girls. We'd go down to the creek and I'd park on the gravel there, man. And I'd reach in the back seat and I'd pull out my guitar and I'd start singing, serenading them girls, man. I don't know where that came from. It didn't ever work out too good because they all liked the rock and roll. They were starting to like this new thing called rock and roll that was coming around, man, in the 50s. And, singing Roy Acuff, Wreck on the Highway. And
that was more your speed.
And all those things. They were kind of waiting for the beach music.
That's right.
And so it didn't work out too good. But I joined the Navy when I was 18, went overseas, and on the ship I was on, there was other musicians, and we formed a country band called the Bryce Canyon Troubadours, and we played all over the Far East and played on the ship. And so that was really an excellent schooling for music for me, because I was playing with the band, playing with other musicians, and they were all good.
Right.
So, but I still wasn't thinking about doing this for a living, man. I had no idea what I was going to do for a living. When I got out of high school, joined the Navy, I thought, well, I'll be a sailor. Well, that was fine for 4 years, and 4 years was up, and I went back to the Ozarks. I still had no idea what I was. So I got a job at a Caterpillar tractor dealer in the parts department. And I thought, well, I'll be a parts man the rest of my life. It's gonna be wonderful. I really liked it. About a year later, I was really setting the job, and this was 1959. I got out of the Navy in 58. I had an uncle by the name of Bob Johnson. He was a preacher. He was my mother's brother, and he came to me at work one day and said, Stan, I need to talk to you outside. And I went out on the sidewalk talking to him. He said, I'm going to start a home for homeless boys, and I need you to help me. He said, it don't pay nothing, but he said it'll be something that'll be a wonderful work. And so I did it. I quit my job,
really? Awesome.
Quit my paying job, and took a job for nothing. And we started a place called the Good Samaritan Boys Ranch, which is still going today. Still going today, and still very successful. I haven't been associated with it since I left 3 years later. But I was at to talk about, to get the word out about the ranch. I went to radio stations in about 100-mile radius there and got them to give me a 30-minute time block. And I had a little Wallensack recorder, and I'd sit there in the ranch house with the boys and play my music and sing gospel and tell about the boys, and people would send in money. And one day, I was in the ranch house there, and the phone rang, and picked it up, and this man said, "Stan Hitchcock?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "This is Don Law, Columbia Records." Well, I didn't know who Don Law was. I didn't know he was the grand old man of Columbia Records that was recording every Lefty Frizzell and every great star on Columbia Records. He just a name. I didn't know who it was. He said, "I've heard about you. Somebody sent me a recording made off the radio of you singing." He said, I'd like for you to come to Nashville. I'd like to talk to you." Well, I thought he wanted to talk to me about the Boys Ranch. I said, "Yes, sir, I'll be there." So my first trip to Nashville, 1961, was what I thought to be a promotion for the Boys Ranch.
Yeah.
I got there and found his office, went in. I didn't even take my guitar with me or nothing. I sat down and met him. He was a fine-looking gentleman, an Englishman, and a wonderful man. And he said he had a guitar over in the corner. I started talking to him about the Boys Ranch, and he said, "Get that guitar and sing me a song." Well, okay, I did. I sang him a song and went back to my story. He said, "Sing me another one." Well, we spent the afternoon like that. And finally he got up and got his checkbook and wrote me a $500 donation to the ranch.
Wow. And
said, "You'll be hearing from us soon." Well, I was tickled to death. I went back to the ranch, carried that $500 back, and it fed the boys for a month. So about a month later, I got a big package in the mail from New York City. And it was a long-term recording contract with Columbia Records' Epic label.
Wow.
And they took me to Nashville and cut my first record. And I could tell right off I was going to like this, man.
Right.
And so I moved to Nashville then. I left the ranch in 62 and moved to Nashville full time. And I had cut a Boys Ranch album in 1959, so that was about almost 60 years ago. And so I've been in the business 60 years, one way or another.
Wow, really?
And it was, I came here and just like everybody else was in the 60s, man, I was starving to death. And it was great times in music because Nashville, the music industry, the Nashville country music industry, prior to that in the 40s and 50s, it was status quo with the Cowboy Copas and the Ernest Tubbs and the Roy Cuffs and the masters of and the inventors of country music. And there was very little younger country. But in the 60s, the late 50s and the early 60s, a new class of country singer and songwriter and musician started coming to Nashville. And they were people that still played classic country, but they were younger people.
Right.
I mean,
Willie Nelson probably one of them, I guess, in the early 60s.
Yes, he was. He came from California. He still wore a suit, wore a little black narrow tie, had short hair and no beard, and was writing wonderful songs. Wrote Patsy Cline's
song, Crazy.
I mean, my goodness, he was ready.
Right.
But Waylon hadn't come yet. He came later in the 60s. But the thing that changed my career that 2 years after I'd been in Nashville, in 1964, I landed an early morning television show on the CBS affiliate in Nashville, Channel 5. Every morning from 6 to 8 o'clock, live band with Hal Rugg, with Lightning Chance on bass, Hal Rugg on steel, and Jimmy Capps on guitar, Little Willie Rainsford on drums, the David Reese on piano. These were people that were the top of the line musicians. I mean, and I was on rhythm and vocals. And Eddie Hill was who was a grand old man of late night country music radio at that time. And we had a wonderful show, and it taught me television. And I used television the rest of my life. I mean, it become part of my career. So after doing that early morning show, it turned into a nationwide show, the Stan Hitchcock Show, from '66 into 1972, all over the country. And I found out that a nationwide television show was as good as a hit record, man, because, well, here's the thing. Before television and music, an artist had to tour all for years before people put together the voice they heard on radio and the face they saw on stage. They heard the name, but they didn't really know the person until they went to see him when they came to their town.
Now TV, and you had TV, and you could.
There was, so TV changed all that.
Right.
Television put a personality with the voice and with the music, and so it was very educational for me in what television could do with music. Well, I toured the world and was an artist for all those years in the 60s and 70s. And in 1983 and 84, video had come around and cable television had started up. I hardly knew what I even had to spell cable television. But it was new. It was, it was in conjunction with big backyard dishes. All the country folks who didn't have access to cable, they had the backyard dishes.
They were huge. They were monsters.
Yeah.
I remember my grandparents had one of them. They were huge.
You bet. So television had changed. The delivery system for television had changed. Well, I figured that, that music video might work in country music. So I got together a group and we started up a network called CMT, Country Music Television. Started it there in Hendersonville, Tennessee, and moved it a couple of years later down on Music Row. And it not only worked, it flourished, it exploded, it really did. And it was the only country music video channel out there. Now, there was the Nashville network, but they weren't a video channel, they were a live program channel. So it was really exciting years. All the 80s, started in '84, ran it until 1991 when it was bought out by Gaylord, and I left and starting up other country music stations after that. But anyway, that was exciting times, because once again, that period of time of the 80s, just like the 60s, there was a new, younger artist, a new, younger songwriter, a new, younger musician, a new, younger producer. All these people came to town during that period of time, and they absolutely had nowhere. The Nashville network was status quo. They were the Opry, and very well. I was the only one that would give them
Publicity.
a window. You know, I gave them a window because my my way of doing television, music television, I had no politics involved with the big labels or anything like most people do today. I mean, if it was good music, I played it. If an artist came in and they had a homemade music video, but it was good, and it was good music, I played it. Mm-hmm. It deserved it. Good music deserves to be heard and seen. So I have to say that those new artists came to town, they kicked out the window, man, and made it into a door, and they just took it by storm. Right. And it was wonderful times to be involved in it. It was very exciting.
That's awesome. And then one of my other questions, when you on that topic, what was the driving force behind Heart to Heart? Started in 1982, correct? If I'm correct.
1980. I started Heart to Heart. Well, I'll tell you why I started. I started Heart to Heart because there wasn't enough videos in the beginning to program a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week video service, man. There wasn't probably 20 videos when I started in the world. And so I started doing, I took my friend Ronnie Reno, who'd been Merle, he'd been traveling with Merle Haggard for 10 years, and he came back to Nashville and was working with me. And we'd sit on the front porch of Wynwood, which is a log house, a log cabin over here in Sumner County that goes back to 1812. And beautiful scenery, beautiful place. We'd sit there on that porch with our guitars and tell stories, and we'd have some of our friends out. And I thought, well, I'll have some of the artists out, and just me and them and a guitar, and we'll just talk. And we call it Heart to Heart. So I started in 1986, and it's still going today. It's on RFD now. But anyway, it's been a good ride, and I'm very thankful that I was able to do that, because the way Heart to Heart was started and still is, it was never an interview show. Never intended for an interview show. It's friends, two friends, or how many friends? I mean, if it's a group, sitting down together with a guitar and just talking like friends and being, telling stories and doing music. And that's what it was. That's what it still is. That's what it always will be.
Right. That's great. We all know when these Heart to Heart. On these Heart to Heart, you sit down with class country legends, and myself, I love watching them with Dan Seals and Paul Overstreet and Glenn Campbell and many more. But share with us some of your favorite memories of those shows, and maybe some of the songs they did with you that may have been a little difficult to pick. I know you always probably got the music before you sat down with them and had a conversation, but tell us something about that.
No, we would sit down absolutely cold.
Really?
I never rehearsed or never, ever decided we're going to do this thing.
Really?
That was part of the spontaneity of it.
Right. That's what made it great.
I mean, it was on purpose. I planned it that way. I wanted it to be that way. I'd sit down with, like you said, you just had my friend Bobby Bear on your show yesterday.
Yes, sir.
And I love Bobby Bear. He's been a friend for 40 years or longer. And I'd sit, we sat down at Heart to Heart, and we'd just start talking. And because we knew each other, we had no problem talking about anything,
It didn't feel like a business thing.
Yeah.
It's
no business.
No business. Just good friends, picking music.
It was just personal stuff.
Right.
And but he's a great example. The probably one of my favorite Heart to Hearts One of them was what you just mentioned, Dan Seals.
Dan Seals, that was a
I
good
love
one.
Dan Seals. He was such an incredible man of music.
We lost him too young too as well. He was good.
Oh yeah, and he'd sit, he'd tell me about his being raised up in a log house down in Texas. He and his brothers. Of course, his brother went on to be a world famous rock and roller,
Right.
and artist and songwriter and
Didn't
everything.
Dan and him play together? Didn't they have a group together at one time?
When they were
When
kids.
first started, yeah.
Well, now his when Dan started out in rock, it was
England Dan.
England Dan and John Ford Coley,
That's right.
and they had some good hits. And then Dan went on his own and went country and just really did great. But anyway, he was a great guest. The probably one of the most poignant heart-to-hearts. Keith Whitley was. RCA did one of the first videos on Keith on his first record or so, Miami. Yeah. And gave it to me to play on CMT, and so I met him early on in his career, and I'd seen him when he was with Ralph
Stanley's group.
But we weren't friends. I just knew him. I'd see him backstage the Opry. But anyway, we become dear friends during the CMT years. And I would world premiere every one of his videos.
He had Homecoming '63. The videos, Hard Living had that one as well.
Yeah.
No Stranger to Rain. I guess that'd be one where he's playing that one live. And Don't Close Your Eyes. You premiered all them as well.
Every one of those were world premieres on CMT. The first time they ever played. And it was. He called me one day in 1980, probably 88, something like that. Said, Stan, I want to do Heart to Heart. I said, well, let's go. I tell you, let's go down to the Ryman. The Ryman at that time was closed. Gaylord had moved out to Opryland, and they'd closed the Ryman. It was just sitting there empty. I called Gaylord and got him to open it up for us. And so he and I did a Heart to Heart in the old Ryman Auditorium. And a little while later, I went into my office. My wife and I lost a baby. Our baby died on Thanksgiving in 1988. Thanksgiving Day. It was 4 months old, and we were up in Wisconsin and showing him to his grandparents, Denise's folks. And he died with sudden infant death syndrome, and there is no explanation for SIDS. It's a horrible disease because you never can say why.
Right.
Anyway, Keith I had trouble going back in the office for about a year. I mean, we were devastated. And Keith would call me from the road. That was before cell phones. And Keith would stop, some truck stop, and call me. He says, Stan, I just want you to know I love you, man. I'm thinking about you. And I love you. And that meant so much to me during that period of time. And a little bit later, I went to my office at CMT, and the phone rang, and I picked it up, and it was Keith's manager, crying, couldn't hardly even talk. He said, Stan, Keith's dead, man. Keith's dead. He's died, man. And it was just a heartbreaking thing, just horrible. And I got on CMT and broke the news to the world.
Oh, I've watched that. I've watched that many times. It's you're very obviously you can tell you're very very tore up about the matter and can't understand why he passed, and you tell the story about how he called you on your about when your baby died. So
he was such a warm, gentle soul and such a man of music, and I miss him every day. I still miss him.
I think you're reading my list, Stan, because that was actually my next question. But I was going to ask you my favorite heart to heart ever is with you and Keith. And Keith is my favorite country music singer. I love Keith. I think he was a truly emotional singer. I think he really meant what he sang. And that was my favorite heart to heart when you went to the Ryman. He talks about how he's up there with Ralph Stanley's band, stuff like that. And then you go on to address the same TV when he died. I think that was a great. And I know you guys had a really good relationship.
But it's it's been. I've done, I don't know how many hundred of artists, top artists, on Heart to Heart through the years, and it's been one of the things, I suppose, that has been my most satisfaction is having done that, because it wasn't just a show. It wasn't just like going on stage and singing a song and entertaining a few folks. Doing a television series for that long, and I'll tell you, I'll give you an example. I'd done it for, as I say, I started in '86, and I was in my office one day. The phone rang, and it was a woman, a viewer from North Carolina. Of course, I didn't know her, just a stranger, but she said, "Stan, this is so-and-so." And said, "I finally got your number, so I just had to call you and tell you what you've meant to my life with all of the music that you've put out there for us, and all of the things that you shared with your life on Heart to Heart. You introduced us to Keith Whitley. You told us when Keith died. You did all the artists that we love. You introduced us to them." And she said, "You and I have such wonderful memories, don't we?" And it hit me that all those years of doing the television show, I wasn't doing television. I was doing memories. And I guess I still am, because now at this point in my life, now that I've stepped back and retired to the front porch, we live here in Sumner County on a creek, an old farmhouse that's almost 100 years old. And I got a porch all the way across the front. I go out there every morning with my laptop, my coffee, my peanut butter cookie that my wife makes for me. And we sit there. Denise usually sits there in her chair and she's doing her Bible study. And I write my story. I write a story every day on Facebook. I call it View from the Front Porch. And really all it is just an old hillbilly with a bunch of memories that wants to come out and be shared. What good's a memory if you can't share it?
Right.
I mean, that's what memories are for. That's what music's for. Music is to share. And I always felt that way about my music, and I feel that way today about memories. It's not an egotistical thing. It's not a big I. Hey, I know it all, I'm going to tell you about it. It's not that at all. I was blessed all these years to associate with people that had an impact not only on me, but on the whole world, with their music, with their lives. And I don't want them to be forgotten. I want to talk about them. I want to tell about Buck Owens. I want to tell about Furlan Husky. I want to tell about Hank Thompson. I want to tell about little Jimmy Dickens and when he had his first hit and he bought his first Cadillac. And he went back to the hills of West Virginia to show his grandma and grandpa. He pulls up there, man, and it's way back in the sticks. And he goes in the house. He's so proud of that Cadillac. He goes in the house and he sees grandma, and she starts cooking him some eggs and bacon. And he's loving on her and talking to her. And he notices that grandpa's gone. He's went outside. He looked out the window, and grandpa is stepping off his Cadillac to see how long it is. And Jimmy goes out there and grandpa says, now, Jimmy knew that grandpa only couldn't read and only thought that Buicks were the finest cars. He'd never had one, but he always thought the Buick was the finest car. He said, grandpa says, Jimmy, what kind be she, son? Jimmy looked at it and said, why, it's a Buick, Pap. It's a Buick. So he had to lie about his first Cadillac to impress grandpa. He later took grandpa for a ride in it all down through the little town there. Had grandpa sitting in the back, and electric windows had just come out in this car, in this Cadillac. And grandpa's sitting back there, and he's got a big old chew of tobacco in his mouth, in his jaw, man. And Jimmy keeps looking at him in the rearview mirror, and you see he's starting to run down out of his mouth. And grandpa's trying to figure how to get the window down. He said, Jimmy, how do you get this window down? Just point your finger at it, Grandpa. Well, when he pointed his finger at Jimmy, hit that button and it went down. He said he just spit brown juice all over the side of his new Cadillac. And he said, how do you get it back up? Just point your finger at it, did it? It went down. He did Grandpa that way all day long. Finally told him about it. And Grandpa said, Jimmy, don't you ever tell nobody about this. Said those men will come after me with one of them jackets that's got arms in the back that they tie behind you and take me off to the home.
No crazy house. That's funny. Oh, man. Yeah, but you've done a lot of heart to hearts. Tell me what makes I know it wasn't an interview type atmosphere, but tell me what makes a good heart to heart. I mean, what makes a good interview podcast? Not really interview, but what's a good heart to heart?
It's just, first of all, as I said, we never did do any kind of pre-production or even trying to figure out what we were going to sing. Never. I might ask if it was somebody that didn't play guitar and I was playing guitar for them, I might ask them just what the songs were so I'd make sure I knew them, and I did. I knew them all. But it was just, again, it was not an interview. It never was.
Right.
It was just sitting and visiting and having, and genuinely having a good time with your friends. I know that when Garth Brooks first came to town, my wife and I just got married. It was, I guess, 1985, something like that. And we had my wife and I had bought a log cabin over not too far from here, over in Castegan Springs. And Capitol called me at the office, my CMT office, said, hey, we got a new kid. I want to send him out to you. I want you to get to know him, see what you think of him. Let him do some of his music for you. So he come driving up in his old pickup and his dog in the back and his then wife, Sandy, and got out, came up on the porch and opened his guitar case, and he had an old binder in there with his music. And he sat down, we talked a little bit, and he sat down and he started singing all those songs. He hadn't recorded yet. He started singing all the songs that he would later record. Some of them he'd written, some of them he'd got from other writers, but he had them all ready. When he got to town, man, he knew. He's the only one that I can really say knew what he was going to do when he got to town. He was ready.
Right.
And it was such a shock to see a young artist like that had his career ready.
Already ready, yeah.
And
so a lot of people get Nashville. Nashville, I don't know what to expect. I mean, I guess I'm assuming so.
And so I started world premiering his videos. Our Capitol put all their videos. He insisted on video for everyone. It's a funny thing how the record companies came. At first, when I first started CMT, the record companies were not behind me at all. The artists were. The record companies considered video an extra expense. They didn't think it had any value whatsoever in the beginning. You know, there was 4 or 5 videos. Ronnie Millsap had one. Just had a wonderful video. But I mean, the artists knew, but the record companies were fighting it because they didn't want to spend the money, right, because the record companies were having to bankroll them. Mm-hmm. Well, it was. I called a meeting. I called a meeting of all the record company heads, asked them to come meet with me. And I put on a meeting for them, and I explained to them. I said, "Look, a video is not just a promotional tool, man, for a song. It's a career builder for an artist. It's showing the personality of an artist, and it will work for you." Waylon Jennings called me at my office about a week later. He'd been on tour. He said, "Stan," he said, I got through doing the show, man, in Texas, and said, I was signing autographs. He said, "I noticed something, man, something happened." He said, people would come up, and instead of saying, "Hey, like your new record," they were saying, "Hey, I like your new video. I saw it on CMT on my backyard dish." He said, "Man, something's happening." He said, "Keep it up."
That's cool. That's awesome.
And so the artists got it first, and they went back to the record companies and say, "I want a video," and they demanded them, and they started getting them. And then, of course, it started working. It started building artists, and I can't imagine an artist today with a hit record that doesn't have a video to go.
Right.
I mean, it's just so it's interesting how it came about.
Did you premiere The Dance by Garth Brooks? Did you do that video for him?
I world premiered it.
Right. That's got Keith Whitley in it too as well.
Oh, man.
That's a pretty powerful video. I know. Obviously, he looked up to Keith, I guess, as an artist for sure.
He brought it. Garth brought it to my office after the day that they got a copy of it from the producer. He brought it over and said, I want to play this for you. I was the first one to see it. And I put it on the next day, put it on as a world premiere and it just, people went crazy over it. It's one of the most emotional videos I think there is.
I agree.
Another one of that same time was 80s Ladies.
80s Ladies, yeah.
80s Ladies.
I've never seen the video to that one. That was a pretty good video as well.
Yeah. Oh, it's wonderful.
Right.
And I world premiered it. And KT, Osland was just such a talented person, or
song,
is
right?
such a talented person, and I loved her. And it's an award winner. It's wonderful.
Right.
In fact, it won the video of the year,
Okay.
the year that it came out in the 80s. So it's been interesting.
Yeah.
About my wife has a theory that a singer or musician or a person who has a performance talent, when they stop doing that, another talent will surface. And she claims that mine was writing. About 15 years ago, I'd never written anything, and we would after my friends would come over to the house, my other musician and artist friends would come over, and we'd get together, and we'd all tell stories, and we've all got a million stories. And after they leave, she says, "Stan, you need to write those down. That's history. Nobody knows where it came from. You need to write that." So I started writing my first book at the corner of Music Row and Memory Lane. 50 years of music and the artists that made it. And it's not, I mean, it's a book that shows, I think, the humanity of the artist. It shows the personalities and the funny stories and the sad stories and the things that happened on the road. I mean, it's a history, but it's not a history like you think a history book of just facts and data.
Right.
It's personal.
Mm-hmm.
It's stuff that and every one of the stories, every one of the things that happened,
Right.
I was there and saw it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not hearsay.
Right.
It's factual, and it is written with a love for the artist, a love for the music, and I'm proud of it. I would invite people to go to our website, www.hitchcockcountry.com, and check it out.
Right. I'm really looking forward to that. Look forward to the book. It's got it covered 50 years. I mean, that's from the Letty Brazils to the Merle Haggards to the Waylon Jennings to Keith Whitley's on it. It's mentioned in that book as well. That's a lot of great personal info for artists that you knew and had a great relationship with.
Yeah, I was very fortunate, and I've got my second book written and ready to publish. So it's when music went away, I started writing. So that's, maybe she's right. Maybe it's the same side of the brain. I don't know.
Right. I'm getting a little bit off topic here, but I'm going to music videos now. I've always wanted to ask somebody this. Earl Thomas Conley, he was a big hit in the 80s. Now, he didn't do much from number one hit-wise, charts-wise. He didn't do much in the 90s, but in the 80s, he did really big in the 80s. That music video he had, Once in a Blue Moon, did you premiere that one?
I world premiered it.
I've never understood that. I've never understood the dialogue behind that video. I know it's kind of like when they're first getting out and stuff, but he's working out in the shed on his motorcycle, and then he comes back in the house. I never have. I love that song. I just never got the video.
Oh, you never have seen the video?
Oh, I've seen the video. I just never have understood the video.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah, I can see he's working on his motorcycle outside and comes back in.
Well, he's showing, that he also takes her, spends that it connects with her again at the end.
Right.
But it shows, Earl was one of the most talented
he has so many good
entertainers
songs.
I ever met.
He has so many good songs.
And he's a dear friend, and he was one of the CMT boys that I consider came up on the CMT videos. He was wonderful videos. He's just an incredible singer and it came across in video as his real personality.
Right.
And he's a fun guy. We had some good times together. He's still doing shows.
I'm trying to look for him on here, and I can't see any tour or anything he's doing.
I hear from him every once in a while. He's one of my friends on Facebook, and he's on Facebook. It's Earl Conley. It's not.
It's Earl Conley.
He doesn't go by Earl Thomas on Facebook for some reason. But I talked to him. I think he lives over around Murfreesboro somewhere.
Okay.
But he's a great guy. I love him, and I wish him well.
Did you know he had? I didn't know this. When I think of the '80s, did you know he had the most #1 hits in the 1980s?
Yes.
I would have thought like maybe a Randy Travis or George Strait, something, but he had the most in 1980, but didn't have many more #1s after that. So that's
he had voice problems.
Okay.
And also had some management problems, I believe, and that kept him from recording. And it, an artist is unfortunately in music today, and music's like from the '80s on, not in the early years. The early years, a man could have one hit and work the rest of his life. That was the rule of that was the rule of the thumb. That in the '50s and '60s, if you had a #1 record, you were set for life.
That's what Bobby Bear was telling me yesterday. He said you were set. He said that's what it really worked out for you.
But that's not so today, and we're more into disposable music and disposable artists. One of the things that I think is heartbreaking, the artists that came around in the '70s and '80s and the beginning of the new country, but not the new country necessarily like it is today, but it certainly was a new, different country, the Garth and all of them. Mm-hmm. And those artists are now getting up in their 40s. And they started doing that a while back.
Right.
And record companies started dropping them. Mm-hmm. Even though at that age it was not a thing that we can't sing anymore. That's when usually you're at your best. You're more mature. Your voice has matured. Your style has matured. Your writing, everything has matured. But it did not fit with today's young radio. They didn't want a 40 or 45-year-old artist, no matter how many hits he had. Now there's exceptions, and Garth is obviously one of the exceptions, but the Earl Thomas Conleys and the others that were so wonderful, so full of still talent, didn't get the attention of today's radio and record companies, and I think that's
shame.
Just an absolute crime against our music.
I agree.
Classic country is
fading away. Traditional country sounds fading away for sure.
Well, classic country music, that period of time from the 50s and 40s, even back to the 30s, but I mean from the time that Ernest Tubb and Moon Mulligan and all of them were making great records to start with, and then the Billy Walkers and all the next generation came through in the 50s, and the Buck Owens and the 60s brought my people and my generation and the Keith Whitleys in the 80s and even into the 90s. There was some great music, great acts that are not today considered in the age group that they want to promote.
Right.
And that's
They still make good music. No matter their age, you still make good music. You know what I'm saying? They don't recognize that. What you're saying.
yes.
I agree. Yeah, I understand that. So, we've got onto your topic about your involvement with CMT, but what do you think the station has fulfilled the vision you had in mind when you first started CMT?
All I had in mind was playing the good music,
Right.
and giving windows to artists that did not have a window at that time, and that's what we did.
Right.
There was no grand plan for it. I'd like to say there was, make me look a lot better, but
Well, it turned out to be a great thing.
but hey, I was dumb as a rock, man.
Yeah.
No, it was. I'd learned television with my own show in the '60s. In fact, my first show, the first ones we did, was black and white. It wasn't even in color yet.
Right.
So I mean, I've seen color come and go. I've seen that now where you can get your television on your phone. You can get it on anything.
Yep.
And my gosh, when you think about the big backyard dishes we used to have, we don't need that anymore.
That's right. That's right.
I was in a guy's one of the legends of cable television. That John Malone, who was the cable, they called him the cable cowboy. He headed up Telecommunications Inc. out of Denver, Colorado, and I was in his office one day in the '90s, and he looked at me and he said, at that point, cell phones had just really started coming around. They weren't everywhere, but I mean, people had them. I had one, and I had one in my pocket. And he said, he was talking about where the business was going. He said, one of these days, that thing you've got in your pocket there will be your way of getting television. And I thought, that's crazy. And I thought about back in the '60s. I was at this club in Nashville. It was on Music Row. It was a honky tonk that all the pickers hung out at. And I was sitting there at the table, and Roger Miller came in, and he had a briefcase, and he sat down with me and me and 3 or 4 others there, and he set that briefcase up on the table and was talking, and all of a sudden the briefcase started ringing, man.
Oh.
He opened it up, takes a phone out, a regular size phone,
Right.
and with a cord on it, and starts talking to somebody in California. And he did that just to show off, because he had just got that, he'd just come back from California and brought that with him. And he said, "Looky here, it's a mobile phone." And so I thought, when John Malone was telling me that we're going to be watching television on a cell phone, I thought, you sound like Roger Miller.
Oh, that's funny. I bet Roger Miller was a funny guy. He was a great guy.
He was wonderful. I loved him. Everybody loved him.
Right. I love all the sound effects he does in the song stuff. I always love that. That was great. That was Stan, you were there and witnessed kind of firsthand a lot of changes in country music, including the country politan movement, the outlaw movement, the neo-traditionalists, urban cowboy sounds, and influence from all different kind of pop sounds. Were there tensions between the artists and different sounds and styles that were competing for airplay? Was it a friendly competition, or were different stylists more adversarial?
No, it was never adversarial between the artists. It was the competition was in the producers and the record companies and stuff like that. It wasn't the artists. I mean, we were just trying to put music out and work and make a living.
Right.
It was. I think one thing that I'll have to say about those years of the 60s, particularly the 60s, but the 50s, 60s, early 70s, the one thing that was lacking, a good lacking, was ego. It was not an egotistical business.
Like, I got this, you don't have that. Like, that's what it is, kind of deal.
And it wasn't, even Waylon Jennings wouldn't even go along with the CMA awards because he didn't want to compete with other artists, his friends.
Right.
And so I mean, it was not that way. There was a camaraderie among artists and songwriters, and though in the 60s and early 70s, that I don't know if it still exists today. I hear it doesn't. I hear that, they all got their buses, they pull up to the big auditoriums, and they don't even visit back and forth, Mike. Man, we used to live together. We used to ride each other's buses so we could visit. We're going on when we do package shows and all of us be on the same show. We'd travel together just to be together because we loved each other. We were friends. We were buds.
Camaraderie. I mean, it was. Right.
And it was good. It was good.
That's funny you bring up the topic about Waylon Jennings not showing CMAs. On our last show we kind of did like, our top duets or whatever in country music, and Waylon and Willie was one, and when Willie would always go, they'd be nominated for duets, Looking Back Texas or Good Hearted Woman. Waylon was never there for the shows, like you said, so Willie would be like, on behalf of Waylon, he always go up to the stage and say, on behalf of Waylon, he's thankful, all this stuff like that. I didn't know that was the reason why he did not go to the shows, though. But you said he didn't like doing it because of competition or something, so that's pretty neat.
He wouldn't, just in the same way with that saddle over there. That's Carl Smith's saddle, and it's one of my prized possessions. I've had it for several years. But Carl was one of my heroes. I met him when I was 16. I was in high school, and his show came to the Shrine Mosque in Springfield, Missouri, and I went to it, and I got backstage. Well, anyway, when he come out on stage, he was the sharpest thing I ever seen in my life, man. He had on a white coat and maybe pink pants or white bucks. I mean, he was.
Was that before nudie suits, I guess?
Yeah, he wasn't. He didn't dress country. He dressed really sharp, and he was such a great talent and a role model for a lot of my generation of the 50s and 60s, and he had a big ranch out by Franklin and raised cutting horses and he competed all over the country. He was really serious about it, and he won that saddle there in one of his cutting horses. And I ended up buying it later. I love it. But he, when they put him in, where I'm going with this story is, when they put him in the Country Music Hall of Fame, he would not even get up on stage. He was in the crowd. They had him stand up. He waved to the audience. And that was his induction into the...
Wow.
He was just so unassuming. He didn't want to, he wasn't a part of the establishment.
Yeah.
And the old ones weren't. Ernest Tubb wasn't a part of the establishment. When I say the establishment, I'm talking about the politics of music.
Right.
The politics of music kind of makes my rear end tired, I tell you. It's music shouldn't have any politics.
It should be good music, fun. You know what I'm saying?
It should be it should be just for the music. It should be because it's good and it's good for you, good to you.
Right.
It was a funny thing with Charlie Rich. one year he was an award giver.
Oh, I know where you're going with this story.
And
I know where you're going with this story.
He's going to tell the winner of the Artist of the Year, and he opens it up and looks at that name, don't say nothing, reaches in his pocket and takes out his cigarette lighter and lights it and burns it. That
was a big controversy. What?
Yeah, it was a pop act.
Okay, I was going to ask you what was the reasoning behind that. I've always wondered the reasoning behind that.
No, it was because it wasn't a country act.
It was country. I like it.
But the CMA was trying to get countrypolitan,
Right.
man, and you know, I won't even mention the artist, but it was not a country artist.
Right.
And he just got through winning the Artist of the Year.
Right. I think I know what artist you're talking about. He's no longer with us, but that's something else. So I know this right here. What about you got spotted by Red Foley, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and how was it to work for Red?
I didn't ever work for Red. I worked with him in this respect. I never was part of his band or anything.
Right.
I did shows with him, but he was my mentor.
Okay.
When I still was at the Boys Ranch, before I'd recorded, I was doing radio shows, doing. We got love bugs, you know.
Yeah, that's right. Ladybugs.
Them ladybugs get everywhere. Anyway, I just picked one off his pants. That's what we're laughing about. But Red had moved to my hometown of Springfield, Missouri, and started a network television show called the Ozarks Jubilee. Great show, and had great ratings. It did a lot for country music in the 50s. When I got out of the Navy and had started the Boys Ranch, I was doing my radio show, recording it in this radio station that was the home of Red Show. They were the production company, had their offices there and everything, and it was all part of the same company. So I'm singing in the studio, just me and a guitar, singing my gospel songs, you know, and recording it. And there was a big picture window there on the wall that people could look in from outside and see what was going on. And while I was singing, I noticed this man walk up with this white leather long overcoat, sunglasses, red hair. He's standing there, man, listening, because there was a speaker outside. Well, I got through and I went out there, I was getting ready to go, and he was waiting for me. It was Red Foley. He said, I want you to know your songs touch my heart. He loved gospel music. He said, your songs touch my heart, Stan. I'm Red Foley. And he said, I'd like to talk to you about traveling and doing some of my shows with me. So I did, and it was wonderful, because you talk about going to school and entertainment. Nobody, Garth or nobody else, could move a crowd like Red Foley. Red Foley had one of the most wonderful talents for reaching an audience that I've ever seen. He'd do some of his old songs, you know, some of his old gospel songs, or Old Shep or something that he'd do a recitation, and man, he'd have them crying in the aisles, or he'd have them laughing, or he'd have them singing along. He told me, he taught me, he said, when you do a show, you need to pull forth every emotion that a person can have in that 2 hours or hour, however long it is. You need to pull those emotions out of your crowd. He said that's what they're there for. It's an emotional experience. And it was wonderful working with him. He was a very troubled man. He was an alcoholic, just like a lot of the early artists, Hank Williams and
kind of Lefty, I guess too. Lefty be classified as one of them.
Lefty was in terrible shape.
Right.
But anyway, Red was an alcoholic during his peak years. I mean, the time when he had the TV show there, a nationwide TV show on ABC, and they would have to take him from the TV theater to the hospital and lock him up in a private room until they let him out for rehearsal and do it. That's the only way they could do it. If he'd get out,
He'd find something to drink.
He'd get drunk
Really?
and
Wow.
disappear. He would go on binges and just disappear.
Wow.
And so that's the only way they could control him. And it was but he was the most wonderful, warm-hearted, caring person I ever met. I loved Red Foley.
They just got disease. That's kind of like how Keith was too. They just had disease. You know what I'm saying?
And you know what? I did, as well as I knew Keith, and I never saw Keith take a drink in his life.
Really?
Never saw him take a drink. He wasn't an open drinker. He was a closet drinker, and that's the worst kind.
Right.
And Red Foley was the same way.
Right.
Secret drinkers, and that's the ones that really end up killing themselves. You know.
Was Lefty a closet drinker?
Lefty was just a play no alcohol.
I know alcoholic.
I worked a show with Lefty. I loved Lefty. He was a great guy, and a great, a great model, music model for just about everybody, particularly with Keith.
Right. Oh, he was a role model for Keith.
And Keith and I were doing Heart to Heart, and Keith had just cut his last album, and he cut I Never Go Around Mirrors, and he was telling me about it. And as he was telling me about it, he said, "Of course, you know, Lefty wrote this," and I was thinking back in the '60s. I was working Atlanta, Georgia, with doing shows with Lefty. He and I were both booked at the same facility, and a bunch of our other friends were in town doing shows at different places. After the shows, they all met at my hotel room. It was Bobby Bear, it was Jack Green, it was Jeannie Seeley, and it was Lefty Frizzell. They were all in my room. I'm flaked out on laying up on the bed with pillows by my head, you know, listening, because there's only two chairs or one chair, two chairs in the room. So I'm on the bed, and Jeannie Seeley is laying on this other bed, propped up listening. Bear is sitting in the chair over by the air conditioner with his feet up on the bed. Jack Green is standing by the door, smoking. In fact, all of them were smoking except me, because I didn't smoke, but the room was hazy with smoke. And of course, Lefty smoked. And Lefty said, "Stan, let me have your guitar a minute." I got my guitar out and gave it to him. He said, "Me and Whitey Schaefer just wrote this song the other day, man. Let's see what y'all think about it." And he sang I Never Go Around Mirrors. And I looked at Jeannie, and Jeannie had her eyes closed and just mesmerized. Bear was sitting with his head down, and he was mesmerized. Jack Green was looking at the ceiling through the smoke, and same way. We were all just knocked out with it. And as Keith is telling me the story about he had just recorded this, I'm thinking of
that hotel room.
Lefty sitting there, and I thought, you know, Lefty recorded this right before he died. What I didn't know was Keith Whitley had recorded it right before he died.
That's crazy.
And
that's unreal. I know Lefty's version is like a little bit quicker, and it's a little bit like fast paced, but it's shorter. And and that Heart to Heart, he tells you, he said, "Hey, my producer said I wish it was a little longer," and he calls up Whitey Schaefer and writes that last verse for it. So I think he does a great job.
And Whitey's still around.
Whitey is still around.
He's great. He's a great artist and a songwriter.
Songwriter as well.
I love him.
That's a good one. I got a few more questions for you, Stan. I know we may took longer of your time than what you like, so I apologize about that. But you were one of the founders of Blue Highway TV. How is it different from CMT, and is it aimed at more traditional country music fan, even more than the traditional country lifestyle?
Well, Blue Highways TV was a lifestyle channel that had music. It had roots music. It wasn't just country. It was country. It was bluegrass. It was gospel. It was hillbilly, mountain music. I mean, it was songwriters. It was more of the lifestyle. It had a lot of stuff going across America and finding arts and crafts and artists and painters and sculptures and stuff like that, and interviewing them. And so it was a lifestyle channel, and it's no more.
Right.
It got bought out, and then the people that had it took it down. But it was a beautiful network. My wife and I started it, and we were very proud of it. And I'm very proud of the fact that of all the awards that I've got in my music career, the one that probably means the most to me is about 5 years ago, I was inducted into the Cable Television Pioneers. And it's a very prestigious, it's people that have started and started networks, and I'd started 3 of them.
Right.
CMT, Americana, and Blue Highways TV. So I was inducted into the Cable Television Pioneers, and I'm proud of that because cable television recognized me, which meant a lot to me. You know, it wasn't a thing that I got because I've been playing music. It was just a thing because I started some good channels.
Most definitely. I got 3 more quick questions here. It's kind of just, they really ain't about you, but about you, but kind of situational questions. If you had to take one album with you on a deserted island, which one would it be?
If what?
If you had to take one album with you on to a deserted island, which one would it be?
Well, I'll tell you, if you look in my music playlist, it'd probably be Keith Whitley or Earl Thomas Conlon.
Really?
Because those people, Earl Thomas's music just really touches me. I love it. And just as Keith, both of them, I think both of them were very different. They were also very good friends.
Right.
And
that duet they do together is awesome. Brotherly Love.
Yeah. But those, but also it would go back with some of the old gospel albums and stuff. I love gospel music. I love the Old Statesman and the Blackwood Brothers music. I love Spear Family. There's just a lot of music that a lot of the early Dolly Parton stuff, I loved her stuff.
Right, that's good stuff. Porter.
Same way with Porter. Porter and I had worked together in Springfield, Missouri, before either one of us came to Nashville.
Right.
I loved Porter.
Awesome. So who was the first person you seen in concert?
Carl Smith.
Carl Smith, okay.
Carl Smith, and on the same show was Little Jimmy Dickens. Little Jimmy Dickens and Carl Smith and Minnie Pearl came on that same
That was Bobby
show.
Bear's first concert too. He said Little Jimmy Dickens was the first one he ever went to his concert.
And I started to tell you a while ago at the concert. Of course, I was knocked out with Carl Smith because he looked like Elvis. I didn't even know who Elvis was, but he was that same stylish look, you know.
Right.
So, but Jimmy Dickens, of course, had on his cowboy outfit with all the spangles and everything on it, and he looked pretty dang good too. Let me tell you, just a size smaller.
Right.
But I was 15 years old, and I managed somehow to get back. I snuck backstage, and I still don't know how I did it, but I got backstage, and I come up them stairs, and I turned the corner and ran right into little Jimmy standing right there. He was standing outside of his dressing room door, and he had his guitar, this huge guitar on. And I said, "Mr. Dickens, I love your music, and I have to say, that sure is a big guitar." And he said, "Here, you want to play it?" And he took it off and put it around my neck.
Really?
Man.
Wow.
15 years old, and I got little Jimmy Dickens guitar on. That thing weighed a ton. It was a big old F-hole Gibson, man, and that thing must have weighed 50 pounds. And so later in, 15, 20 years later, Jimmy's doing my television show, and he's got another huge guitar on, and I tell that story. I said, "Jimmy, first time I met you, I was 15 years old, and you let me hold your guitar." He said, "Here, you want to hold it again?"
What a great story.
He took it on and put it on my neck again, and it still weighed about 50 pounds.
Still the same. That's hilarious. Well, there's another one. What was the first album you ever purchased? You remember, Stan?
The first album,
First album you ever purchased? Yep.
it would have been Roy Acuff.
Okay.
And it wasn't an album. It was a
45,
70,
45.
No, it was 78.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah. First record I ever purchased was Roy Acuff. On one side of it was Wreck on the Highway, and I don't remember what the other side was, but it was Roy Acuff, and I also purchased all of Hank Williams after he started.
Right.
That was my first record. I purchased probably in the late 40s, and so Hank wasn't around yet, or he may have been around, but he wasn't.
Big on the scene.
So that was it. I mean, it was classic country all the way.
That's right.
But Webb Pierce, Carl Smith, Ernest Tubb, and I loved Ernest Tubb. Ernest Tubb was the sweetest, kindest, gentlest man I think I ever met. And I was sitting on the bus with him one time. He called and invited. We were booked on the same concert tour up through Ohio. And he invited me to come and ride with him on the bus, him and the band. Man, I was just, oh boy, Ernest Tubbs invited me to ride his bus. I thought, man, I must be something. Well, what I was fresh meat for the poker game. I didn't know it until I got on the bus. But the minute that bus left town, they started playing poker. And they played poker and only stopped long enough to go in and do a show, come back on the bus to go to the next town. They constantly played poker. There was a non-ending poker game going. Well, I never was a real big gambler. I mean, just not very good at it. I like it all right. But of course, I'm sitting there playing with them, and I'm sitting on the inside of the bench seat around the table. Ernest is sitting next to me, then the band is around. 4 of them are around the other side. And we're playing, and Ernest is winning, man. And I've lost. I didn't have much to lose, but I've lost it. Most of the money in front of him was my money anyway. And I'm hot. It's August. It's August in Ohio. We're going down the interstate about 80 miles an hour. Old Hoot Gibson, the bus driver, had that thing floored. And it's 2 o'clock in the morning, black as the ace of spades. I'm thinking, boy, I wish I had some air. And I look over, and there's a window right there. I think, I'll just crack that window, man. I slid that window open, and the money going by me, money going by me like feathers and pillow off of it, just out the window and gone. And I'm froze. I'm just froze. And Ernest just said, "Son, you want to close that window?" I was humiliated. And of course it's gone. We couldn't find it.
Go find that money.
No, it's about $500 out there laying somewhere. Oh man, they never asked me to ride the bus no more.
That's hilarious. Well, Stan, we sure appreciate it. I know this interview's been a lot to me, and I appreciate your time for sure. Everybody make sure to check out his book at corner of Nashville Music Road, Memory Lane. He's also, make sure to find his new one he's putting out as well. So tell us a little more about that, Stan, and the website.
Well, come to our website, man. It's got a lot of my stories out there. It's got my music, got some of the videos. And again, it's www.hitchcockcountry.com. Come see me.
And that's our interview with Stan Hitchcock. Thank you so much, Stan, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk with us. And thank you, Brent, for all your hard work interviewing Stan Hitchcock. I want to thank you all also for listening. Please rate us and review this podcast. It will only help us grow. And for more links to our YouTube channel, our social media accounts, or to become a Patreon supporter, go to patreon.com/diggingupbones. We'll have all the links in the description of this podcast. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back to talk country very soon.
To say